Planning to order.
What
It's
time?
7:34 p.m. And unless anybody has pressing matters, I'd love to start with Tim, just so he doesn't have to sit through any of our,
Boring stuff.
our boring stuff, and he can go home if he wants to. You're welcome to stay, Tim, but I always like to
I can
give
always
you the
watch it later.
opportunity. Yes, you can. Now your image is being subject to being recorded due to whatever state open meeting law we have.
If I may just quickly point something out, Tim, I put you on our spreadsheet. If something's inaccurate, please let me know. I stole it from the email that Maureen sent.
No, that was the idea.
It is the second page of your little packet that you have.
Awesome. So how is CPA going this year, Tim?
So, at first, we didn't anticipate we'd have many projects, but we knew of one anyway, and now we have 4. So, to back up, we approved a project for the tennis courts that's been completed. We approved the fence at the community garden. That's been completed. There's some money will come back to CPA, maybe a couple $1,000s. We approved the scoreboard at the baseball fields. That's been done. We approved an announcer's booth. That hasn't been done. That money will probably come back and they'll reapply because that was only $10,000. And then we approved the pavilion, and that article's going to be on the warrant again this year because the location has been modified. And since it was rather specific in the article, and then the presentation, it seemed as though it would be appropriate to go back to town meeting and let people understand where it might fall. So that money hasn't been expended. The Historical Commission has expended some of the money that was put forth to make copies of important documents and photograph some of the more important pieces. And they're moving forward deliberately, I would say. The Bullard House, because of the drainage issues, and now the drainage issues are being dealt with more comprehensively, so they're looking at what's going on at the 1870 Town Hall and how that impacts drainage there. And they had a dig yesterday where they tried to discover a possibility of locating another tank for the septic system because the Board of Health has asked that be pursued if at all possible. I mean, there's not going to be a lot of septage there over time, but I mean, it needs to be addressed. So there's all these other steps that are being involved right now, but the architect they've been dealing with has put them in a position where right now, the last few days, they've been going through the house and looking at each room and thinking about it from an interpretive point of view and how they might utilize those spaces educationally and historically and stuff. So they're really moving into that next mode. So I think the $200,000 that they've got for those projects, some of that probably will be leveraged for a possible grant application, which is what they spoke of when they first got that money. So it's slower than they would like, but the deliberate nature of it, I think, probably means it'll be done better than we've done it in the past. I mean, we've made changes there before, but they've been inappropriate and not up to the standard that we probably needed to, and as a result, some of that's had to be taken out. So I think those projects are all looking reasonably good. We did manage to finalize the purchase of the 72 Carter property, so the town owns that now.
Just the land, not the home?
Yep, just the land. So we got the 6 acres. And of course, we purchased Horseshoe Pond, and we were hoping that the state would match, and the state matched $867,000 or something like that. So $850 comes back to CPA. So CPA's coffers are substantially increased as a result of that. So right now, the community housing portion of CPA, which has been collecting money annually, This 10%, as you know, goes from the general collection. The match between the state and what we get from fees internally, 10% of that goes to each of those three categories: community housing, rec, and open space, and historic. So community housing's been collecting money for a number of years, so they have, this cycle, they'll probably have somewhere over, they should have somewhere over $230,000. The rec and open space is probably, there may have been 50 left in that, and there'll be some additional funds this year. And then the historic is probably somewhere maybe in the $50,000 range too. Maybe not quite that much, but anyway, there's some in each one of those buckets, but the most significant one is community housing. This year, we collected over $300,000 in fees, but the state match was significantly less because the fees they collected from the land court, the registry of deeds collects a fee when there's recordings, and as a result, the number of recordings were down and the fees were down. So from the state, we got about $179,000, which is like $120,000, $130,000 less than we got last year. So the last 2 years, we got close to 100% match. This year, our match is somewhere around 58, 59%. That still puts us in the top 20 communities in the state in terms of the percentage that we got back. So, we fared well. It's just that they didn't have the revenue. In the past couple of years, the state legislature has put in an additional $20 million, and that helped boost the amount of money that was available, but they didn't do that this year. So the rainy day fund, I guess, wasn't quite as
Dried out a little.
available.
Mhm.
Yeah, it rained enough. You'd think that there would be any problem.
It rained a lot, yeah.
Yeah. So, if you look at Kristen's sheet here for fiscal '25 for CPA, we've got 4 projects. The first one is a housing coordinator. The number is modified a little bit. It'd probably be somewhere around $15,500 per year for this year and next year. The Regional Planning Commission got a grant to support a regional housing coordinator. In the first year that they made it available to the communities that wanted to participate, there would be no charge. And we're currently enjoying that opportunity. With the housing trust in place, it seemed appropriate to try to get them some support. And the housing coordinator has been meeting with them, and we've essentially got 4 or 5 hours a week through the year that we can utilize. Jasifa is her name, and she's been meeting with them. So the second and third year, the town has to pick up, and it's, like I said, 15,000 plus a little. We're going to use 10,000 out of CPA, so this figure could be adjusted in that regard. The cost is a little more than 15,000, but the CPA share is going to be 10, and then the other 5,500 and whatever is going to come out of funds that we've been accumulating over the years for affordable housing that
The planning
planning board and Eloise oversee. So some of that's mitigation. Some of that's been mitigation money that came from Brook Lane when it first came in, and some of it's mitigation money that came from Highland Commons. And so we've utilized some of those funds over the years for things like the housing production plan and stuff like that. And we utilize those funds to support the Metro West housing consortium that we're part of. There's 8 towns that are part of that. Assabet, what do we call that? Assabet Regional Housing Consortium. Yeah. And then, and that group has helped us with the subsidized housing inventory, maintenance, and stuff like that. So, we'll continue to work with them. We'll continue to work with Josefa, and then the Housing Trust will be in a position where they'll probably get a lot of good advice. So that's the first one. If we jump down to Housing Trust Project Fund, the 200,000, because that's related in a sense. The consortium for the Community Preservation Act has always said to us, be cautious of how you make funds available to project groups. Make them explain what they're going to utilize the money for and how they put it to use and stuff. And in some towns, the article on the warrant is simply take 10% of the CPA funds and give them to the Housing Trust. And that's it. And there's no accountability at a town meeting, and the transparency begins to fade and disappear over time. So the consortium's always said, put it on an article, make people explain what they're going to do with the funds, and have them go to town meeting and earn the money. And so the Housing Trust and the CPA committee, I think, are content with that approach, and as a result, we've got this article on here. So that's $200,000. What they want to do is utilize it for 2 possible programs.
Projects.
One would be first-time home buyer support, and one might be rental assistance. And they've got a model from North Andover, I think.
I thought it was air.
It's one of the it's either Andover or North Andover.
Okay. It's in my office.
Yeah. They've got a model, a template that's pretty specific about how funds could be used for programs like this, and so they're probably going to try to adopt that internally and then utilize that as their approach.
And if you accept the money and then you sell the house within like 5 or 10 years, depending on how much money, you pay it back.
Yeah, there'd be a sliding scale based on your tenancy. So if the longer you're there, the less you'd have to pay back, and then you get to a point where it just disappears. It's a grant outright. So, and it might be 10,000. It might be 15. It's the funds that make it possible for someone to maybe make that leap, so they can actually put themselves in it. So.
Yeah.
And then the rental assistance programs. During COVID, there were a lot of people with difficulties paying rent, and as a result, a lot of towns tried to figure out strategies to help with rental assistance, and this would be a pool that would be available for that. So it would sit. We have to figure out the structure for this. I mean, June tends to make the money into a pocket, and then this is a little different though. It's not going to be expended in a specific time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it might sit there for quite some time. So it's an experiment in a sense. And there'll probably be other programs in the future where they'll come in and say, we're thinking about trying to help people age in place, for instance, and we want to utilize funds to help make modifications with doorways and ramps. There's a lot of opportunity out there. So.
See, the Housing Trust can help an individual person using state guidelines. The town cannot.
So once it goes into the money goes in the housing trust, it has to be expended through that trust, or if it's not getting used, can you eventually move it into a different?
You can always vote something.
Yeah,
You can, okay.
we can check on that, but my sense is that the opportunity to return to the issue and modify it if you needed to would be there. But we can ask that, because that's a good question.
I have looked at Wellesley's because that's what I do. And they have an additional program for particularly old houses, and if you qualify under the needs, financial needs, if you only have 2 circuits, electrical circuits, you need to bring your house up to date, you can go through them. You know? And if people have trouble paying their taxes, and they can meet with the assessors or the Board of Health, because they keep tabs on, you know, who gets a reduced sticker, and they can take care of them first. You know, maybe they need a National Grid audit, an energy audit, and then if National Grid says, hey, you need something and it's to the tune of, you know, $1,500, $2,000, maybe they could loan them that.
And these are all things you can do through the through this housing trust program.
Yeah, I mean, they'll work with someone like Habitat for Humanity. So what they've done is they've gone through tax title property in town, and they've identified parcels that might be potential sites for homes. And then they'll probably work with Habitat to see if there's an interest on their part, and then the town can work at the notion of trying to dispose of that property through the right channel, and then that would get turned over to Habitat. There might be some incentive money with some of this pool here, you know, $10,000 or $15,000 to help the process along, and then Habitat might come in and build a home that would end up being an affordable unit that would help us with our subsidized housing metrics.
See, right now, all of our affordable homes are they're in one project or two projects, and they strongly suggest that you do what they call infill, so that if you just have room for one house, you only put in one house. You know, and it's to spread the affordable throughout town, so that you don't go, oh, there's an affordable unit, there's an affordable unit, you know.
So one recommendation I would have, and I'm sure, is it Josepha?
Yeah.
It's probably familiar with this. HUD has been doing first-time home buyer and rental assistance through the HOME program. It's capital HOME. And a lot of these cities and towns that you're mentioning have likely set their programs up based on this HUD HOME program. So rather than reinvent the wheel, my recommendation is beg, borrow, and steal from other cities and towns that are already doing this, because why, you know,
Well, when
reinvent the wheel.
Sawyer Hill came through, there was one person that was trying to buy a home, and they needed the down payment. And we got it through Massachusetts.
It's a great program. It's near and dear to my heart, because my very first government job back when I was 25 was doing affordable housing and doing exactly this. And it's phenomenal what it can do for people to help them get a home, or, you know, transition out of a housing situation that may not be the best, or a shelter situation or anything like that. It's great.
And then the next 2 projects both address open space and recreation. So the funds that are available in those specific pots are less than what these 2 projects would request, and so as a result, we'd be pulling money out of the budgeted reserve that CPA carries as well. So it would come out of open space, whatever's left in that bucket, and gets added this year, and then the rest would come out of budgeted reserve. But there's plenty of money in both those accounts to satisfy these next 2 projects. So
Do you know, for the rail trail, what is this for, 150,000?
So what they're doing is they want to apply for a program that the state has, and what the state wants is a 20% match to what they would offer as a grant, essentially. So they need to demonstrate that they have the capacity to pay the whole thing for this study that they want to do to evaluate the possibility of extending the rail trail.
Where the railroads used to go, they
Yeah.
no longer go, so the state is encouraging reutilizing it as a trail.
Right.
And in a town that doesn't have sidewalks, there's good use.
So Berlin's in a situation where east of us, there's a well-defined network
Right,
of trails, and west of us, from Sterling out to Northampton,
Good too,
the
yeah.
pieces begin to fall into place. So Berlin ends up being the bottleneck right now, and the state has identified, and targeted Berlin as an opportunity to try to make the improvements that would be necessary. So the goal
I
of...
know, I was on the rail trail committee for 2 years, so I'm very much familiar with what was going on.
Yeah.
Nothing was done for 20 years, basically. And now suddenly the bill is 150,000. So, whoa, what was this for? Yeah.
So this is for a study, but 80% of it would be a reimbursement. So out of CPA, we'd be spending somewhere, 30,000 or something like that. So
So who's doing the study? Is
so
it
it's the
state?
Conservation Commission would hire a firm that would do the study.
Right.
Okay.
This is the DCR grant
Yeah.
that they were gonna do the study
yeah.
and maybe some preliminary design just on the DCR portion of the rail trail, the land that is owned by DCR. The not as controversial portion of the project, let me put it to
The
you
other
that way.
thing is, if it's that controversial, then don't bring it up to Coburn Road, just bring it up to Highland Street.
Well, they're talking
So
about
those of us
Yeah,
on Highland
even
Street are
that was
controversial.
just the
problematic,
part
yeah.
owned by DCR.
Yeah.
And
So
what part is that?
that's to Coburn.
That's to Coburn.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
when the committee met with Conservation the other night, what we talked about was a strategy that might involve alternative, can we with this money, and that's what some of the questions that they're pursuing now, if these funds were available, if we received the grant, would we be able to review alternative routes? Because the Donald Lynch Boulevard study that was done by the Metropolitan Regional Planning Commission suggested utilizing the Assabet Rail Trail to connect to a trail that would come through Donald Lynch's property, connect the hockey rink and Solomon Pond Mall, jump the river, North Brook, and get to the River Bridge property. And then the question mark was, well, what then? Do you go up Whitney to the aqueduct and use the aqueduct to get to West Berlin, that sort of thing. So and then the East Coast Greenway Alliance projects a route through Berlin, and it doesn't utilize the rail trail, but it suggests that Berlin is a logical link to get through to Worcester to connect with some of the trails that go down into Connecticut and stuff.
So would some of that be coming under other things like complete streets?
Some could, because if it entailed the roadway, you could involve the complete streets possibility. So, and you can use CPA money for this purpose, but right now all this is asking is for money to begin to pursue an analysis with the sense that the majority of the funds would be paid for out of the grant. So what we said to the Conservation Commission was, if they want to know that it's similar to what happened with the purchase of the land for Horseshoe Pond, we had to demonstrate that we had the capacity to buy the whole thing, which we did, in order to apply for money that then would be, given back. And we
Yeah.
got $867,000 out of the $1.25 million or whatever.
Yeah.
So that worked well. In this case, they want us to demonstrate that we have the capacity to come up with 150, but Conservation is saying, we're not going to do it if we don't get the grant.
Does it have to be a local match for that grant, or could it be a state earmark?
There's 500,000 earmarked for rail trail for Berlin now.
One. You know about the 100,000?
Well, there's 500,000 that's earmarked that
Hasn't been approved.
Hasn't, I mean, you know, it's an earmark.
It's a bond bill,
Yeah,
probably,
so, I
environmental
mean,
bond bill.
what'll ever happen, you know, I doubt it, right?
I have some strange news. It's funny you mentioned this. I found this
Ah.
out yesterday. Breaking news. I got contacted by DCR about our $100,000 earmark for the rail trail that was passed as part of the 2022 Economic Development Bill.
Uh-huh.
And who should sign the paperwork for this earmark that has been granted to the town of Berlin?
So there you go.
So I said, well, where did this come from and who asked for this? I don't know anything about it.
Well, Meg Kilcoyne, I think,
Yeah,
asked for
It came through Meg Kilcoyne's office. I finally got to the bottom of that. I'm wondering, to help you out a little bit, could that potentially be used as a match? Because the select board are going to be talking about it Monday night.
You know, that would mean that this would, that if there's 100 there, and that we'd only have to commit X amount from CPA to
Mhm.
come up with 150. The question is, what we said to conservation was, do we need to demonstrate that we have the 150, or do we need to demonstrate that we've got the 20% or 25%?
Okay.
And if it's only 25%, then that drops this number significantly, and it means that the money that you're talking about could be utilized.
Sometimes it has to be a local match though, and so if it's a state earmark, it may not be eligible, but that would be something that's really important
Yeah.
to look into.
So we have to do more homework on this because there's breaking
Mhm.
news.
I know, sorry,
Really?
breaking news.
No.
But that's good to know.
That's good.
Well, you
This is
can
very
always
bizarre.
vote
Yeah.
150 and not spend it all.
Well, that's, I mean, clearly conservation is saying you can vote 150, but we're not going to use any of it if we don't get the match. And if we get the match, we're probably only going to use 25 or 30. So it's similar. It leveraged the money in CPA to go and get the grant and then spend far less of your CPA money, or have your CPA money returned once you get the grant. That's the way it works.
But it seems not having the study right now is like another big bottleneck for even knowing how to make a decision going forward.
That's right.
Right.
We're always, you know, it's like complete streets. Unless you spend the money to
Yeah.
do the analysis and be shovel-ready, you can't apply for the, you know, it's on your prioritization plan, and the state's got the money, and, you know, now that you've got some engineers that are willing to work with you, you've got plans that you can submit, and you've done it. So
Yeah.
that's the bottleneck we've always been in. The state wants you to demonstrate, you have to spend money to make money. So,
Right. Which is a big
fortunately, we're in
complaint.
the situation where we have capacity now, which we never had before, so.
Mhm.
One thing just to mention, because I wasn't making the connection till now, so if you're happen to be around Monday night with nothing to do, the board will be talking about this at 7
7,
shortly. I would say like 7:15 or 7:30, but it's up
well, that's a big difference.
early on the agenda. I can text you, but I can't text your home line. It'll be because, and I've got to talk to Carol, and I invited conservation as well,
So Carolyn's in,
and she's in Rome, so she's going to see if
Sicily,
Maddie
yeah.
can go.
good.
Or Robin Berry.
Right.
The concern I have, and I don't want to hijack the meeting on this, but the real issue is this is a polarizing issue for this community. So before we accept $100,000 from the state, the select board, that is the select board's money. They need to make a decision what they want to accept it for, and I need to find out what it can be used for. So
Yeah.
if Concom wants to do this study, as you're saying, to really explore possibilities, this could potentially be a great use of that 100,000 to look into it, to do something exploratory, and then get some of the answers. Because every time I talk to people, I get different stories on different sides. Like, well, this is going to cost us. Well, no, it's not. If it's on DCR land, we don't have to maintain it. Yes, we do. I think we need to find some answers
Well, I
to
think-
all of those questions.
See, I think when things like that come up, they're like getting too far ahead of the process, because knowing what it's going to cost, when you're saying like who's going to have to maintain it, that's going to come down the line.
It
That's
is,
not-
but our problem is we tend to build stuff and not have money for maintenance. So I think that's where people are like, we don't want to do another thing where all of a sudden it's going to fall on the town to maintain if trees fall across it, or shovel,
Yeah.
snow plowing, or whatever.
But I mean, I'm seeing like, I've been hearing about this process for a long time, and I was more involved with bikeways and things when I lived out in Somerville, Cambridge area, and I know it takes a long time. And so I'm speaking for myself more, but having lived here, I think it's really important to move forward to get some concrete advice
Mhm.
Yeah.
on what you can do, and I think keeping it very discreet, picking, instead of trying to say we're going to do everything and have the most brilliant rail connection, bikeway connection between Boston and Western Mass, we're going to focus on what we can do right now, get some information, and then I think from there you'll have more solid information to picture, okay, this is what we can do here, and then the next step is what can we do from the next one. And that takes a long time. So if anybody thinks we're going to have a rail trail in 1 year, it's not going to happen. But if you can
Right.
do that,
And the internal study that the town did was 5 years ago, and the state's approach to rail trails has changed dramatically in that period of time. So, again, we have to understand what the process is, what the state's role is, particularly on this particular stretch
Yeah.
of land, how we fit into the overall picture, I mean, there's a lot of moving parts. The other problem, or the other question that we have, is that the application for this grant is February 1st, and we've said to the Conservation Commission, you may have approval from the committee, but that's not the town's commitment. And so will your application be valid if you can only demonstrate that you've got the committee support and you don't have the town support until, perhaps Maytown meeting. So, and then, there's still a question as to what would happen. So this one has a lot of moving parts, but in essence, we talk about 150,000 on this number, but that's not what the impact on the
Well, in
CPA's
the
funding would be.
application, it said it's going to be a phased
Yeah,
thing.
so
And
that's,
even if there's resistance now, I think it will happen. It might well be happening after I'm gone. Or after the current landowners are no longer there.
but the other thing too,
Could
when
be a
you're
long
talking
time
about
for me.
resistance,
Exactly.
resistance is still based on a lot of the unknowns and what people are guessing at. And so once you get your plan, you're actually going to have a different set of people approving and disapproving, because you're going to have something harder, it's going to be different.
yeah,
And I mean, as I said, that's what I saw when I was, out in Cambridge. They suddenly got really into putting in bike lanes everywhere. And I knew hardcore cyclists who hated bike lanes. They thought it was the worst thing that ever happened to them. And then there were other people who thought it was the best thing and would never have gotten on a bike until the bike lanes went in. And there were suddenly people who had never thought of going around any other way were biking everywhere and doing it. But you couldn't predict from when the process started to when it finished to the allies for the process were going to be.
Well, I think the fact there's been a study that took a few years to do already that's identified concerns, I think we need to explore that, and be sensitive to what the concerns are, but also make sure that we have all the facts about what is actually going to happen.
Yeah.
And I think
Want me to send
exploring
it
it on
to
a
you?
feasibility study level makes sense, because
Yeah, kind of
on one
interesting, yeah.
hand,
Yeah.
it's gonna happen to some extent no matter what, because DCR actually controls that land, so they could say, come on in, rail trail, and then they do it without us and we have no say. So in some ways, it would be better for us to be involved in the process, so at least we get a say as to what's going on. On the other hand, again, I would have concerns about any maintenance costs that would come along with it. So I think we need to get more information.
Yeah.
yeah. So, and that's the goal of this one. So
Right.
that's that. And then the final one is from the rec committee, and it's 255. Actually, their number's modified a little bit, but we're investigating that too. So they've given us an application for 260,000.
60, okay.
If we look at it though, 30 was for things like nets and benches and goals and stuff, and we've asked the consortium whether that's an allowable expense out of CPA, or whether that can be considered a maintenance cost that ought to be covered through some other source. There's essentially what they want to do is upgrade the playing fields for soccer and baseball. They want to, a number of those fields don't have any grass at all, or if they do, it's not grass, it's a variety of different weed species. And there's an unevenness, I mean, there's safety issues, there's, you know, it's not fields that, you know, other towns necessarily would want to play if there was going to be a tournament, that sort of thing, you could host. So they look at this as an opportunity to try to upgrade the fields, make them safer, and make them more resilient. A substantial amount of the money is for a well and for an irrigation system that would provide water for the playing fields for soccer and for baseball. We asked about phasing, and they said that certainly would be the approach they'd have to take, because they wouldn't want to take all the fields out of commission at one time, so they do it in several years. And as a result, again, we'd probably go to town meeting with the notion that, you know, we were asking specifically at that time for a certain amount of this funding, but that it meant that we would be looking for it to be an additional funding source the second year, perhaps. So phasing is a possibility. We're asking some hard questions about the utilization of the funds for some of the items they've listed, and they're
Trinity's from Berlin.
yeah, they're being responsive to the request, and I think we'll have more information as we proceed. So.
Was there, or I don't know if this materialized, but there was talk about asking CPA for funding for the playground to make it ADA compliant?
They didn't come through with them.
It didn't, okay.
No. There was, that got tossed around one time.
I was gonna say, didn't we talk about that? Did
ARPA
we
allocated
approve
some
it?
funding for the
Okay.
equipment, but then Julie said, which I liked,
They were gonna
let's
go to
take a more
CPA.
comprehensive approach, go to CPA and fix the blacktop or whatever it is, mulcher,
Yeah.
and then make it ADA accessible as well. So I'm gonna reach out to her and just kind of find out where they're at on that.
Yeah,
I thought it was a good idea.
I do too.
Doesn't make sense
Somebody
to do
gets
it
I don't wanna
twice.
do pieces.
Still liable.
I'm trying to avoid piecemealing
If they
things.
still want to use the ARPA money, how much longer do they have? to-
December 31st, 2026.
Okay, so
Okay.
they have time to get the whole deal together.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's what I know.
Okay, what's your time schedule look like?
In terms of pinning these down,
Yeah,
we have to have the warrant articles ready with numbers by the middle of February, so. And we've said, as we, you know, talked about in the past, we have said to folks, any ability you have to identify the long-term costs in terms of maintenance and stuff like that is, and that's particularly true of the project that involves the soccer fields.
Right.
because, when you invest this kind of capital into an irrigation system, and, you know, you've got water
Maintenance,
lines and
Mhm.
right. And
meters
whose
and
responsibility would
wells
it be?
and pumps, and- yeah. So, we've said to them, they need to chat with you folks and with finance, and
Mhm.
we're not, I think our feeling is that our role is to identify that as an issue for these groups
Mm.
and tell them that they have to solve
Yeah.
that issue, that we're not gonna solve it for them. That
Yeah.
we'll listen to their proposal. If we think the proposal has merit, we'll ask that it be brought
Mhm.
onto the warrant and taken to the town floor. But those additional add-on costs that aren't
Mhm.
part of CPA, that are, like, you know, we've all said, gonna stand in our way for
Mhm.
years
Right.
and years, we
Yeah.
need to identify and be aware of, so we can make sure we've got the capacity to cover them, so. And that's particularly true of both the rail trail and the South Common stuff.
Frankly, I don't think the study's going to have a maintenance cost.
No.
Or the project that comes
Wait.
after it's going to have a
No, but
maintenance.
you know, there needs to be a willingness to entertain those
Mhm.
questions about,
Yeah.
The
you know,
concept.
what happens in
Yeah.
those other towns that have surfaces that, I mean, a lot of people are using stone dust now and, you
Mhm.
know, not finishing them off with asphalt and stuff, so.
So what happens when it washes out?
Yeah, I mean, you've got those questions, what kind of routine maintenance does it take? And a lot of these communities rely on volunteers, but,
Mhm.
you know, are they successful in that? Or are they, do they have difficulty? There's a lot of enthusiasm about trails like this,
Mhm.
and I know a lot of trails are maintained by volunteers to the significant degree. I mean, you look at that network of trails that's west of us through Sterling, and
Mhm.
those, you know, pretty significant. But nowhere near as elaborate as what you might find as you get closer to Boston in terms
Yeah.
of, you know, bridges
But it
over
took
roadways.
Boston, it's taken Boston, what, 30, 40 years? So that 495, in my opinion, is now what 128 was 30
Yeah.
or 40
Yeah.
years.
Right.
Agreed.
And, I mean, that's
Yeah.
how it is.
Yeah.
Sorry I derailed you.
Ha.
Ooh, that's painful.
You were waiting for that, weren't
I
you?
was. I won't lie.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I haven't even had a chance. It's like hot off the press.
So what that means is that she asked, that initially we got word that it was a $500,000 request.
And I think that's in a
And-
bond bill.
And so you think this is separate from that? Or do you
Yes.
think this is
I
a
believe this
modification
is-
of that original one?
That's a good
I
question.
mean, did someone say, are you crazy?
No, Harold Norton's been pushing this for years.
I know, but he's gone.
Yes, but Megan worked for him.
But what I'm saying is the 500
Are they one and the same?
Or are they
Right.
separate? And,
I don't
you
know the answer
Meg's
to that.
office could probably answer that for us, but,
Yeah, I can ask.
you know, obviously, the Conservation Commission doesn't know about this yet.
They do.
They found out today,
No.
2 days ago.
So I initially found out last week, but I was trying to do
You've
some.
known for a week.
Well, the reason I haven't broadcasted is I was trying to figure out where it came from and who asked for it.
Right.
So I reached out to Conservation initially to say, did you all request this? Because that's where I thought it came from.
Yeah.
And Carolyn went, no, but this is great. So then I said, okay, and I needed to dig more before I went public with it, so to speak.
Yeah.
I certainly wasn't trying to keep it for anybody. I just needed my information. So yes, it came through Rep. Kilcoyne's office.
And
No specific person asked for it. It was part of this 2022 Economic Development Bond Bill.
yeah, but it actually exists, which is the good thing.
It does
As
exist.
opposed to.
And I have
yeah,
a contract waiting
Yeah.
to be signed.
As opposed to being something sitting in the sky. But, yeah, how to utilize it most effectively and whether you want to accept it because of the strings attached is the.
Correct.
yeah.
And that's what we'll be talking about on Monday. I'm going to do some more research between now and then.
I won't do any research, I'll just show up.
We'd be happy to have you. I'll do the legwork.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, good question. All set?
Awesome. I think so. Any
It's been a
questions?
pleasure.
I
No,
have
thank
one
you.
question.
Oh,
For me?
Well, you're part of it. It says demo the Brown Barn at South Common. So if the Brown Barn is coming down, why can't the pavilion go in its place?
As I understand it, the concern is that they want the pavilion to attract young folks who would want to utilize the school's playground.
Correct.
And so they want to distance the pavilion where people with young kids might come and
Then
congregate.
put a thorny rose bush up on the
Well-
school property.
They think it will be better utilized by the fields than it will be because people go to the rec courts aren't usually sitting around, they're playing. But parents are sitting at the fields watching their kids play. And the schools don't want it in that first location, and the police
That's
department
town
doesn't
property.
recommend it either. Yeah.
Their eyesight stops.
Yes, but we work with them.
Their eyesight stops, ma'am.
Police department had some concerns as well.
Yes, because they couldn't see through the Brown Barn, but with the Brown Barn coming down,
I mean, honestly, from everything I've talked to them about, it may make more sense to put it near the fields in terms of usage and how much usage it will get over there from people sitting, and then move potentially the gazebo over near the rec fields or rec courts. But that's for town meeting to decide. That's why it has to go back to town meeting, because we could potentially get challenged if we move it to a different location, because someone could say, hey, I only voted for that contingent, there you go, contingent upon it being at that original location.
Right.
Everyone has their opinions on it, so we want to make sure it goes to a vote and it, you know, gets done properly. And if people want it to stay there, I don't have a problem.
It does appear as though the rec committee has bought into the notion that it would be better utilized in this new location.
Yeah, but a lot of people, you see them down there with the fishing.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it makes sense to put it there. Besides, why are we afraid of our own teenagers if they go there? They gotta hang out someplace.
No, I think it's that people would be inclined to use the school's playground. The schools would have to put up signs or constantly be out there kicking people out, because once it's there, people are gonna let their kids use the playground.
Yeah.
That are taxpayer supported.
Yeah.
But they can't use it during the day for security purposes while the school's in session.
Of course, put up a sign.
Yeah.
I have to say, I have seen
Put a $40,000 fence
pavilions.
again, no.
I have seen pavilions more commonly associated with fields than with not fields.
The good
I think we
news-
need two.
Two would be
pavilions.
phenomenal.
Two.
I like two.
Yeah.
There you go.
Tim,
Because
you
I
got
personally
money for two?
wouldn't use a pavilion by the field because there are always people over there. So I'd rather have the
Right.
pavilion somewhere quieter.
See?
Yep.
And the debate continues.
Right?
Well, you know, CPA money it appears as though we'll be in a situation, I mean, there's more towns and cities that have come on board. Worcester's come on board, Westboro, Shrewsbury, I mean,
Yeah,
so
so
as
the
a
money won't
result,
get as
it's diluted,
smaller.
and
Diluted.
it means that, you know, our draw is probably gonna be less than the 100% match that we were getting there for the first years. But if the economy picks up and things rejuvenate, then maybe we'll pick up a little more. But I mean, essentially, it's it's $500,000 a year, which means if people are patient for projects and accumulate funds, and then seek to leverage the CPA money, like so many have already done, you know, you can really get substantially more out of it than just what we've got. So maybe a second pavilion in a couple more years.
There you
I
go.
did want to say something to that about, you know, I mean, this time you brought the rail trail study, but you are bringing up a good point for people to think about in the future about bigger projects that would need studies,
Mm.
that they actually do have this opportunity to talk to CPA about getting funding for it. It's not like they have to just find it somewhere else, because
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to be,
not that you would spend
cautious.
all the
I mean,
money, but that.
no,
that-
but I think there are some applications where we can apply CPA money to
Yeah.
get that type of help, and then there's other situations probably where
It can't be used for maintenance.
Well, not for maintenance, but what I'm saying
for
is that.
studies,
But
yeah.
for other, as people in the community get other ideas for things, just knowing that, oh, this is yet another resource that you can look at. And so you're not just going back and forth, well, maybe this will happen, maybe that will happen. Well, okay, your next step is you have to get a study, and they're not cheap, and they have to follow guidelines, but that will give you the information to let you know how you can move forward.
Yeah.
Because it's really nice to have the idea for the project, but you can't move forward until you start crossing all those Ts.
Once you start spending public money, it's public money,
Yeah,
and people want to know.
yeah,
And then they can disagree with you.
yeah.
And I just
Thank
emailed the
you.
state to ask them, because by the way, the contract says 100,000 shall be expended for improvements to the rail trail in Berlin, which
That's
to
not
me
a study.
says not a study.
That's
So I just said,
implementation.
I just wrote the state back, said, well, we don't have a rail trail right now, so can we use it for a feasibility study? Because how are we supposed to improve something that we don't have?
Right.
So, we'll see. I'll let you know.
Well,
Good.
see if it can be affiliated with the complete streets. A lot of those programs look like they carry big bucks.
Yeah, we just put in a $500,000 grant application for the center
Yeah.
of town.
Central of town.
Yep, to do sidewalks around Carter, Woodward, and all around the common, or it's not the common, but
Yeah.
the church's property, if you
Yeah.
will.
We own the flagpole.
We own the flagpole. Yeah.
Correct.
We own the flagpole. That's
And
what
we-
he said.
and we
the
decorate.
clock. And the clock.
And
We own the
I
clock.
understand we own the
Yeah.
clock. too,
Yes.
that's
Yeah. That's a discussion for another day.
right. Yeah, because the Crackart family, in the gifts that were made in Barbara's name, some of those funds are potentially for a shelter or a gazebo or whatever on the common.
And we also technically shouldn't be making any types of improvements or
No.
maintenance or decorating on land that is not town-owned. So we need to essentially explore a lease situation.
Yeah.
Just heads up.
No, there could be some good, I think it makes sense because it's always been available for the town to utilize in so many ways over the years, but the sort of the more official language that stipulates what those relationships are.
It needs to be
Yeah.
formalized. You should
Yeah.
add that to our list.
Well, and I think, Thomas and the gang there are certainly interested in talking about those relationships.
And then $500,000. Can we get rid of the power lines to,
Yeah, wouldn't that be something?
I know, the town will
Dig
look
up all the
1,000 times
rocks.
better. I could think,
Oh, yeah.
just look at Hudson downtown. It's beautiful because they got rid of the power lines.
Oh, I didn't even think about the fact they don't have power lines. Thank you so much,
That's
Tim.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway,
Minutes. Minutes look good to me.
yeah, look good to me too.
I have one correction.
Oh.
Eloise wanted to see if I was paying attention. She misspelled my name.
Yep.
She said she did it on purpose.
Did she make you a 10?
A tin.
Oh, a 10. You're a 10,
I'm a
not, or
10.
you're a
I
10?
am a 10.
You are a 10.
I
Okay.
am a 10.
I'll remember that.
Okay.
But I'm not actually on the committee, so I can't vote to make that change.
So I make a motion, we vote to approve the minutes after
As amended.
Eloise corrects Kristen's name.
And I really
Kristen's
don't
name.
care, but it was funny. She said she does it to make sure we're paying attention, so.
And she
No.
brought it right up.
I want to make sure that you understand this
Wait. I'm
635,000.
gonna make you stop.
Okay.
Because we have to vote on the minutes and then we can circle right back to it. Do you second the minutes?
I
Vote.
seconded it.
Okay, all in favor say aye,
All right.
Aye.
aye. Okay, now what's your question?
Just to make sure I understand, this project cost for 635,000, this money is available, or are we gonna fund
Those are
it from the
re-
taxpayers?
No, those
No.
are the requests for CPA money that is
Yeah.
from the
It's
CPA.
available?
Yep, it's
From
available.
CPA, okay.
Yep.
That's why it's on a separate spreadsheet, so that it doesn't look like it's coming out of
Okay.
the capital plan that will go as a
Right.
warrant article.
Yeah. Yeah, so as far as CPA is concerned, we as a committee can approve, we can give our recommendation for
Right.
these projects.
Yeah.
But not approval.
I'm amazed about this cost of studies. $250,000, come on.
They're engineers,
I
they're
know, I know.
architects, they're,
Support staff, admin.
Well, they were saying 150 for the rail trail.
Yeah. Anyway, let's go forward.
Kristen, do you have things to talk about?
I do. I can make it quick
You
and not derail you further.
You can do whatever you want as long as you use the words derail multiple times.
I will do my best. So to further derail you this evening, if you'd like to look at the first page of the packet of spreadsheets, what I've done is I put all of the capital improvement requests that we received on the town side together. And those requests came from the Select Board, Highway Department, Fire and EMS, and Police. A couple of comments on these. Under Highway, the municipal office's air duct cleaning. I am not certain that that's a capital item because it is a maintenance item, not necessarily an asset, which is
Correct.
typically what's qualified as a capital item. So I was actually thinking that either needs a special article or it needs to go into a maintenance line item in the operating budget.
I asked Fred when he was here about contracts for maintenance, like, because it seemed like it was something that should be done on a regular basis.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, and I
Yeah, I'm
said to
thinking along
him,
those lines.
maybe we fund it, because he says maybe every 5 years it should be done, so maybe it becomes something that we put a little bit of money away for in the budget every year. Or in an article, I'm not exactly sure yet, but I don't think it belongs in capital. But yes, it needs to be done.
yeah,
I can tell from looking at the vents, there's, black.
grotesqueness.
It's gross, and people ask me about it and tell me to come take pictures and send them to Fred. So, because they're concerned, and it needs to be cleaned. It's been about somewhere between 7 and 10 years. I think Fred told you at your last meeting. So, just to point that out, that one's in question for me. Under fire and EMS, the public safety building expansion, I moved out to FY26 because obviously we don't have $1.8 million sitting around, number one. And number two, there is a new state program coming out for municipal buildings that is very similar to the one that MSBA provides for school buildings. I would like to get shovel ready and wait and see what is available for funding through that program. I don't see that as something that can be funded this year, but I don't want it to fall off the plan because it is a request. So I think it should be in the mix. But on a good note, the SCBA air bottles can come off, and Chief will talk about this. We received a donation of air bottles from an adjacent community that are valid for another 10 years. Because they decided they got a grant for a different model of some type. These match ours, and we're able to take them in, and they did not want any payment for them because
Nice.
they were looking to dispose of them. So that is a $72,000 savings, which is fantastic. And Chief and I consequently had a conversation about the rescue tool replacement for $82,562 and whether or not that could be funded in '25, but when I asked the question, he actually said, when we look at the gas meters, they really need 6 of them, not 3. So his ask to you will be to increase that request from 9,000 to 18,000 to request 6 devices. He wants to have them on all apparatus. I think given incidents we've had in town, I think that is a worthy request. So I just filled that in after the conversation I had, but obviously they're going to come and present this all to you. I was just wanting to give you a preview.
So police and fire are coming next week.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then the last piece of good news I have is the cruiser replacement number under police will be going down by about $52,000.
I saw that somewhere else.
The cruisers are going up about 12 grand for FY25. So Chief was actually able to secure an FY23 that was left on the lot at a significant cost savings by using ARPA funding. So he went to the select board, asked about ARPA funding, and basically there was some ARPA funding that was allocated, and if you switch to the ARPA spreadsheet, I'll explain it. Project 12, the third floor renovation, the board voted to take $52,000 out of that allocation and create Project 18, which is a police cruiser for $52,000. So it is just a reallocation of funding with an eye to the fact that the third floor renovation cannot happen for $200,000. It cannot happen without other funds. And by the time state funds are potentially available, should they become available, you could use potentially mitigation funding as a match if a match were to be required. ARPA funding
Where
needs
was
to be
this
spent.
third floor?
Here,
Yeah, well, we're
Where
assuming
the
that
ma-
people
where the
are gonna
machine
go
room
for
is.
it, yeah.
Huh?
where the machine room is that was supposed to be finished out for police and fire in this building.
Oh, over the public safety section?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's a 2-story. So you're gonna put a 3rd story on?
No, it's finishing out that space. So technically, if you look at the building as a whole, the building has 3 stories.
Oh, okay.
So that's what, looking at the building as a whole, but you're right, on the public safety side, it does have just the 2.
Okay, well, my question is, you're going from the expansion of 1,800, in the interim, should you have, like, plans?
What do you mean, the expansion of 1,800?
1,800,000.
Right, right.
Should you go from, I mean, that I assume would be the building. How much would the plans be? Would we have to do plans
So
next
we
year?
did a preliminary cost estimate and conceptual drawings, that cost $11,500 that we've already expended, that's the 3rd column on the spreadsheet. To actually do design plans, we got what we thought was a high estimate was $63,000. So we're not sure that we want to move forward with that. We're looking into other options, but they still do have, $136,000 that they could put towards plans for that space to be shovel ready.
Well, when you said shovel ready, that's
Okay.
when I thought, well, where are the plans?
No, they're not done yet because we're just starting.
Okay.
Yep. So,
Would I be able to see the 2nd floor? I mean, are they gonna put windows in the front and raise up the back?
it would just be finishing out what's already framed out there and putting in dormitories, a day room, a police evidence room, and staircases that go up and down from the police and fire wings.
And that's $1.8 million?
Believe it or not, yes. Unfortunately, when the building was built, there was an understanding apparently that more systems were connected up there and it was made ready to complete, and it was not. So having to connect HVAC, plumbing, put holes in for the staircases, pour the staircases. You also have to look at the possibility of doing a lift because then you have an accessibility issue. There's a lot that goes into it.
Wow.
Yeah, I know.
So that's a high estimate, I would say, because that estimate is good for 2 years and it assumes some cost escalation and it's on the high end. But still, say it comes in at 1.5, we still don't have 1.5. So
How much do we have in our stabilization fund?
I don't have that number off the top of my head, but I can get it for you. Why, you want to build it?
I just want to know all the numbers that
Okay.
are available.
Sure, I can get you that for the next meeting.
Thank you.
We also assume that people are gonna vote for that.
Correct.
Most of the
I
people
know,
that
but you have
I
to
talk
have the
to,
information.
they're all getting upset. What? Why do we need dormitories?
Because
If
the
you'd like female
fire,
firefighters.
they stay here now.
I know.
They
Right.
stay here?
Yep, they work
Yes.
12-hour shifts and they work overnight. We don't have a call department that's a solely call department anymore. We're switching over. We have per diems, we have full-time employees, and we have female firefighters. And you really, legally have to have separate spaces. You can't have one room with 2 beds and 2 chairs in it. That doesn't fly. So,
Can I back up on the police cruiser?
Mhm.
You said they're buying an older,
we're buying a
You-
23,
they're buying a 23 cruiser,
a new one.
a new one. So it's just considered new.
It's just at the end of the run year.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not used.
Is it a hybrid?
I believe so.
So the other problem they're having too, wasn't it, finding the hybrids?
Yes, and now Ford had pulled a whole bunch, but they then flooded the market in 23 with them later on. So this is a cat and mouse game with Ford right now, and now what they're doing is they're changing the model again for 25, and you're not going to be able to fit the equipment in the cages from the old vehicles into the new ones, so there's going to be an added cost for that. So the idea was to get a 23 where the equipment could be transferred because there's a savings not only in the vehicle, but
Mhm.
also in outfitting the vehicle. So
Good.
I think it makes sense.
Yeah.
And then I think other than that, we've gone over all of these before. Nothing else has changed on the ARPA list. We are up to a lovely 18 projects. So As you can see, we received $458.14 in ARPA funding. To date, we have appropriated all of it, and we have expended $213,178.08.
Have they completed the antennas for
Oh, yeah,
the
good
police?
question, yeah.
Nope, we're on the schedule. We're waiting to get the exact date, but that had to go out to bid, and then it had to go out to bid again because the ownership of the towers changed. And the new tower companies have lists of who they will allow as vendors to work on their towers. So the vendor
Well,
we
then
had
they should,
was not allowed, was not on the list. It's kind of like an exclusive club, apparently. They weren't on the list, so they couldn't work on the tower. So we had to put it out to bid. We did get it out to bid, and that installation will be happening as soon as they can get us scheduled. So I'm waiting to have a
did the
date any
bid-
day.
Where did the bid stand?
$37,500,
And where was the original bid?
$5,000. Because we're going from a small company to a large company
Oh, my God, well,
Yep.
that's crazy.
We don't have
From 5 to 37,000?
when we don't have a choice.
We don't own the tower.
We don't own the
so-
tower. And so the tower, these cell tower companies can decide to pick a monopoly basically over larger companies
No,
to do
it's
the work.
their contractors that they feel
Yeah,
comfortable
and they're
dealing with
larger
their-
companies. We had a small one-man show that was gonna do it for $5,000, and he's not allowed on the tower.
What was our funding for that we,
That's an article for the radio project.
right, it was a couple of years ago that we approved.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right, last year, yeah.
Yep, so there's basically the radio project, we've kind of split into what I call 3 phases. There's this antenna installation phase, which I would call phase 1. Then there has to be the cabling and interconnection, is cabling and filters, I think, which is really expensive, which is phase 2. And then phase 3, which we actually applied for a federal grant for, was to add a third tower site. And that's a $400,000 federal grant that we will find out in the next couple of weeks if we received. That was through Lori Trahan's office
And
And
that would
then, you know,
be
there was
for
big
this-
debate about the towers,
in terms of.
about where a third
Where to
tower
put
might
it,
be
yeah.
added.
South
And-
Portland, I guess.
We didn't have
And
to
then-
identify a location.
The antennas are supposed to improve our connection by 95%.
The
according to
antennas
the-
bring us, I believe, to about 70. The filters and the cabling would bring us to, I think, 85. And the third site brings us to 97.
Would the third site also help our area towns? Because they do mutual aid and they do talk about interconnectivity.
Yep, one of the things they're looking at is if we could do a tower with a couple other towns in Northborough, perhaps. But that's not finalized by any means, that's just under discussion. And that would also allow, like you said, for us to be able to speak with mutual aid towns, to be able to communicate between Neshoba Valley District towns.
To have a comprehensive system.
Yeah, well, one of the reasons that it's done so well and it's advanced so far in this federal grant process is because it's a major safety issue.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you have people using their cell phones out in the woods, and what if there's no cell service? The other piece we're looking at is Tohoto just got a grant to run fiber cable from BMS to Tohoto, and it goes right down Linden Street. So we got a quote, and I believe it's for less than $10,000 that we could tie this building into it, which would make a huge difference as well. So we're looking into that as well.
Cool.
Trying every way we can.
I know. It's hard. It's thankless. And it's forever changing.
It's just scary to me, and you know, even the Congresswoman's office was like, "Oh my gosh, like, what do you mean you guys, you know, can't hear over the radio?" And you know, it's not only a safety concern for the residents, a safety concern for the firefighters,
Right.
for the EMTs, for the police officers. I mean, the last thing we need is for somebody to get injured because you can't communicate, or worse. So that's it. That's all I have for you.
Thank you. Anybody else have anything they want to discuss? Eloise, you have an evil grin.
No. It's been in my opinion, it's been a productive night.
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
opinion as well. And we have police and fire, as I said, coming next week at our next meeting.
What's
Great.
the date?
The 21st at 6:30. And isn't John responsible for those notes now?
No,
I
not
thought
yet.
in January.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Just
That'll be
girding
interesting.
out. That's why
6:30
Steve didn't
you
want to
said?
be here. Yes, 6:30. That's what I said.
Police and fire?
Police and fire. Police first, fire second.
21.
And other than that, I think we've heard from everybody that we're aware of at this point in time.
I make a motion that we adjourn then.
Second?
Second?
There you go. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
So adjourned at 8:44.